It's okay. Skype's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, how's it going? I'm resident of Colwood here with Gordon Dy- Dymowski.
Dymowski.
Dymowski. I'm so sorry. Bad at pronunciation. I'm horrible at it. Uh, so we're here to discuss 1795. Before we do, we're going to hold a moment of silence for Gordon's mom, Linda, who passed away here. So please join us. All right. Um, so 1795. When I go back and watch 1795, Gordon,
Mm-hmm.
I noticed a lot of weird things that I know they weren't initially leading up that they didn't sorry, they didn't plan 1795, but at times it feels like they did when you go back and look at the previous like the earlier episodes. What are your thoughts?
I think that when you look at 1795, it's kind of um, they're trying to transition away from Victoria Winters as the lead to Barnabas Collins because Barnabas essentially drove the initial rise in ratings. Um, I think, and I mean this as a compliment, I think 1795, the writers have said, let's just throw stuff in and see how it works. And they probably like went back through past scripts just to like see what ideas they could pull. Because this is the season where Dark Shadows really becomes Dark Shadows.
Yeah.
Because you've got tons of lore about the Collins family. You've got lore about like new characters, Angelique, Trask. Um, I also think that this is kind of it sets the template for what would happen in 1897. But I think this is the series where um, I think they were going for broke, and I mean that as a compliment. And I think the fact that some things don't quite fit is probably due to the fact that you're dealing with, Dark Shadows was a soap opera, which is maybe a level or two above uh, local TV programming. It was a network soap, but it was still production wise. So they probably didn't have put a lot of thought into, hey, let's take notes to see how we're going along. I mean, they probably didn't plan 1795, but they thought, okay, what do we do to make this guy a hero? Well, we could one have him do something heroic, but he's still a vampire, so we still have to stake him. Well, let's go back in time to figure out how he became a vampire. Well, how far back do we want to go? Well, in this past script, he said they say he's like it's hinted he's like late 18th century. We'll just throw him back there. And so I think it is very haphazard, but I think it's the writers kind of saying, you know what, we got to take advantage of this. We want to keep the ratings high, so let's just go for broke.
Yeah. I think what's really strange is when I go back and because I first watched Dark Shadows when in syndication on the Sci-Fi Channel, and it aired from the very beginning. And there's for those who have watched Dark Shadows like me and Gord, and for those who haven't, there's a seance. The first seance is conducted for to summon the ghost of Josette, and they're sitting there, Vicky, Laura, Roger, Dr. Guffrey, and what happens is Josette's ghost speaks through Victoria Winters. Now, speaking strictly for myself, I didn't think that was that big of a deal that a ghost spoke through her because I had seen stuff like that prior. So when she goes back when they do the seance in 17 and later on to go back to 1795, way later on, when she goes back, that's what I thought she meant. When she said, "I think something's going to happen to me," in the episode prior to the seance for Josette, but then later on she goes back in time. I'm thinking, God, she must have. This is sort of like Vicky's premonition coming true. It's strange. What do you think?
I think it may have just been. one of the writers kind of said, okay, the writers' room, they're probably thinking, okay, how do we justify Victoria Winters going back in time?
Right.
And one of them just said, oh, didn't we do something back in the Phoenix thing where we kind of said she touched Josette's ghost and she kind of knew something would happen? So it's not they probably weren't like writing down notes. Otherwise, we wouldn't have. The great thing about Dark Shadows is it feels very organic in terms of its storytelling, and
Yeah.
it feels like maybe the show that I can think of that does the opposite is it's not like, say, the current season of Star Trek Picard, where it's just kind of like you have no idea where the writing's going. Here it feels very much like they're heading someplace, but they don't necessarily know where they're heading, but they're at least trying to build towards something. And I think the fact that they knew they had an end goal, which is making Barnabas Collins a good guy. Explaining, normally in a show like this, you might either get like a one episode flashback or maybe a week of a flashback. You're not going to get this kind of, period drama on daytime TV.
Here's something really interesting too. Before they have the seance, in episode 361, Julia Hoffman's in the mausoleum. Now, I kept misremembering who was in the mausoleum, but this is after Dr. Woodard's death. Julia's in the mausoleum, and at first you hear a woman weeping. Well, then you hear a woman laughing, a wicked woman. Now, I don't think they had Laura Parker cast by this point because they're not in 1795. This is pre-seance. But I've always felt that this here is sort of somewhat of a tease of Angelique. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Yeah, they probably did. I mean, it was okay. Let's just throw something in there and we'll answer it later. You know what I mean? Let's just throw something in. And it's part of that really clever world building that Dark Shadows does. It's the great thing, and I think one of the things that Dark Shadows does well is it not only builds its world, but it suggests like a bigger world outside. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like you could easily like there's a whole story involving Angelique and the Dupre family. Their adventures before they even encounter the Collins. There's this whole rich kind of mythology that Dark Shadows suggests, but never outright says, this is it. And I'm sure it's part of, I think it speaks volumes that when they revived the series in 91, they kind of said, okay, we'll do the Barnabas arc and the 1795 arc. Mm-hmm. Because those are the two that they're very complementary, and those kind of set the stage for the way the show kind of really just dives into literary tropes and other horror conventions and really just deep dives in a way that many shows don't.
I agree with you. I'm with you. Nothing about Dark Shadows ever, no matter how many times I go back through it, nothing feels forced. Everything feels so natural. And all the characters, too, are so excellent. So they freeze time, present day. Phyllis Wick and Victoria Winters switch. Now you have Vicky back in 1795, and she's holding the Collins family history book. What did you think about them taking all the cast and just we know Barnabas had a costume party of the period. So you could sort of say, well, there's somewhat, you could debate that they were teasing that, because Roger's Joshua, Elizabeth's Naomi, Nancy Barrett's character, Carolyn, is Millicent, and Anthony George is Burke Devlin. He's dressed up as Jeremiah Collins. So those characters are playing those roles in 1795. What did you think of that?
I thought it was clever. I think, if you look at the budget at the time, they probably couldn't afford to hire like all new actors to play the roles. I think what it does a couple of things. One, it gives the actors a chance to do other stuff. So like, Joel Carruthers is probably thinking, I'm so tired of playing boring old plain noble Joe. Oh wait, I get to play a money grubbing con man. Yes. Um, you know, I'm sure Catherine Lee Scott was like, okay, I'm tired of playing, this tough waitress, this tough, hard bitten waitress from with a rough dad. Oh wait, I get to play a French noblewoman. Cool. But I think it also does something much bigger, which is, as I was looking through some clips on YouTube, what it reminded me is that I think the best thing about 1795 is it made the Collins family a character of the show.
Yeah.
Because you can see different, and Patrick McRae has often said this in his book, is that it's not about archetypes, but it's the archetypes around the actors. So like the Collins family father, Roger is the hard drinking, is the, I don't want to take care of my son, give him a governess. Joshua in this arc is the, I'm going to, forget what my son wants. I want him to marry this person so that I can join with this shipping company in business. If Nancy Baird's playing Carolyn as a kind of wild child, here she's kind of like innocent, naive, a little bit more scatterbrained, for lack of a better word. If Thayer David's playing Professor Stokes, who's noble, Ben Stokes is kind of he's noble, he's loyal to Barnabas. And even Jonathan Frid, in the initial arc, he's kind of guy who's been in a coffin for 175 years. He's going to get Josette, regardless of what he did. And here he's a dude who basically does not want to be. I think he thinks he wants to marry Josette. He had a dalliance with Angelique. I don't think it was, to be crude, hit it or quit it. I get the sense that there's like something a little bit more there in terms of a potential. And then you've got like Laura Parker, who is, I think this is her first role where she's like, okay, yeah, I want to play the ingenue, but I could really do this. And so I think having the actors play these characters, really, it sets up familiarity for the viewer, because you're not dealing with, okay, who are these new people? Like where's Louis Edmonds? We love him. Why is this new dude playing? It gives you the sense of these are patterns that will repeat over and over again. And we'll see it later in 1997 with Edward. We'll see it in 1840 with Daniel. Like, it allows us to see kind of how these dynamics are, in a weird way. I think 1795 suggests that the Collins family are cursed. And this is long before they thought of the Miranda Duval, Judah Zachary arc. I think this is a way of kind of building familiarity, but also showing like, yeah, these are, and the weird thing in this arc is that the family relationships are not always direct. Like, if I remember correctly, Jeremiah was Joshua's brother.
Yeah.
But he was technically Barnabas's uncle, but he was always a brother to Barnabas. Yeah. I get the sense that like with the Dupreys, like the Countess Dupre does not think too much of the Collins family, and that Andre is kind of like, just, yeah, whatever, I've got a daughter, we'll marry her off, we'll save the Collins skin. There's a real sense of like, I could see why Barnabas might want to. I mean, this arc, I think we see Barnabas as someone who doesn't have a lot of agency. I mean, the one thing that he does of his own free will is get involved with Angelique, and look what happens.
Yep. I think that's it too. Like, something you touched upon. The Dupre family feel like, other than Josette, I would say she loves Barnabas.
Mm-hmm.
But the rest of the Dupre family, Natalie and Josette's dad, they're just there. They're, oh, we're just here for you. Like, go on. Like, they don't really care. Like,
Yeah, I mean to her, and and I would say this of Joshua. I think they all see this as a business transaction. They
yeah,
don't see it as our daughter's going to marry someone she loves, um, because they could probably, um, I think they could probably find someone a lot, more appropriate than Barnabas. I mean, for them, this is all, and it's really horrendous because that's all this is a business transaction. I mean, there is affection between Barnabas and Josette,
yeah.
but I would argue that maybe Josette. I'm sure that if Dark Shadows were being made now, there would be a scene where Josette and Barnabas would talk, and I think they would both realize, like, we both don't really want this, do we? You know what I mean? Josette might want it a little more, but I think there'd be that, okay, this just isn't working, and we're just playing the role.
I, sorry. I love too how not only I was talking about this in my Jeremiah Collins character retrospective. Not only is Joshua hoping his son gets married, he's trying to get his brother to marry Millicent.
Yeah, and you would think that if you're going to solidify the business, and I can't believe I'm actually saying this out loud about Dark Frickin' Shadows. I mean, even in the 1960s, you don't necessarily, even though, yeah, it's the late 1800s, family legacy, you give it to Jeremiah.
Yeah.
First off, basically Joshua can walk away.
Yeah.
Jeremiah, if he, you put the pressure on him to have sons.
Yeah.
And if he has, and that way you've kind of, you've now solidified the business empire, but I'm sure the Countess and Andre would be like, oh, that Jeremiah, he's the dude. He's the one. Yeah, he's good for, and of course, ironically, he does end up marrying Josette, which is, and then he dies and gets a big old pig eye.
What did you think? Now we know Angelique puts Josette and Jeremiah under a spell. So, what did you think? They get married. What did you think of the duel? Well, even the setup of the duel, and then the duel between Barnabas and Jeremiah.
I think they were going for the usual kind of swashbuckling
Yeah.
trope in that regard. Um, I think that at that point, you know, and it's hard too because like I think Barnabas was so. I think Barnabas is so, and they always played him as like kind of super obsessed with Josette for some reason, and I think that's more out of family pressure. But like but it's kind of like at that point I would have said, I think most people would have said, you know what, forget the guns. You know what, you can have her. You know, I'll walk away. I can do better.
I think what they're trying to do too, for those, I think this is more that for those in the, for those who are alive in the '60s who are familiar with the show, who were watching it at that time, will remember when Barnabas turned to Jeremiah and looked at him. Well, not technically Jeremiah, but Burke Devlin, who was dressed as Jeremiah, and looked at him like if looks could kill. And so when you see the glove slap, you're sort of somewhat seeing that look all. They're trying to give that look all over again in a
Right.
weird sense. In my opinion, I want to stress that, and I do think they do a great job with that. But I love Barnabas. I love him to death. But buddy, you should have spent some time at the fire. He is not a good shot with a pistol.
Yeah, well, he's probably too. He's probably. I mean, he was too busy getting it out, macking on Angelique. I mean,
Yeah.
and I will say this, and I will always, when I first saw that in college, and I first saw Angelique and saw her interaction, despite all her actions being evil, I'm like, Barnabas, you're an idiot. I'm on Team Angelique. I mean, let's face it, Angelique, she has magical powers. She's not a bad looker, and quite frankly, it's like you see, he seems to be much more at ease with her on some level, even though he's his usual super neurotic, like, oh, You need to stay away. It's like and I know, again, spoiler alert for those watching, later it realizes he does have feelings for her, but it's like, go with her. Like there's the advantage there. And you know what? Because his dad's not, Joshua is not going to give him the keys to the kingdom. You know what I mean? I think it's going to be, it's going to be like the old, um, it's like, um, Barnabas, to use a Mad Men reference, because I figure it's probably the only thing that's contemporary, it'll be then contemporary, even though it was made in or modern times. Barnabas is not Don Draper. He's Pete Campbell. You know what I mean? He's not the guy you go to for leadership. Um, he's kind of the eager to please, will do anything at this point, which is, I mean, the only time it takes him 175 years in a coffin to get something of a backbone.
Yeah. I think too, I give credit to Lewis Edmonds. Joshua is such a presence. I mean, I was sort of talking about this in my retrospective with Joshua. I love Elizabeth as a matriarch, but when I think about dominant matriarchs, I instantly think of Joshua Collins because he treated everybody not as equal beneath him. Everybody did, hey, you're going to listen to me, and everything's going to be done my way or the highway. And I more think I see why Jeremiah gets the credit, because Jeremiah did stand up to him. Jeremiah would speak up. He would, where Barnabas would sort of, like, I agree with you. He would sort of, he's wanting to please his dad. He does love Josette, but he's also wanting to please his dad. Like, I don't want to cross this guy because he does wield a lot of power.
Yeah, and Emmons is really good at doing that kind of very contained character, but finding the nuance within it, because it would be very easy to do Joshua as Roger. Yeah. I think Roger is just the kind of guy who is very contained, very focused, because he knows his whole family history of strict emotionally unavailable fathers, but at least, and over time, he becomes a slightly better dad to David. Joshua is just like, the only time we ever see any kind of fatherly affection is when his son says, hey, I'm a vampire, please kill me.
Yeah, I mean, I mean this in the utmost loving way. Joshua Collins is a dick at times. He really is. He's so cruel at times, but then you're sort of looking at him like, there's this dude, the most he shows emotion before the stake, before he gets asked to stake his son, I think is when his wife is when Naomi dies. But this whole time, he has like treated Naomi like crap. It's like, but now he's finally showing that emotion. It's like, dude, where has this been? Is it shocking to you, like, as it is me? Or
well, knowing that Roger likes to drink, I'm wondering if, kind of off screen, Joshua is just like, and at that time, water, you couldn't sanitize water, so they're drinking a lot of alcohol. So he's probably thinking, oh, I'm thirsty, I'm gonna go get some beer, and just chugging that down.
Yeah.
Or well, actually, knowing Joshua, he's probably too good for beer. So it was like, find brandy or absinthe or whatever the heck they were drinking. He's boozing it up with Brent Franklin.
It is. What did you think of Laura? Here's Laura Parker. She's in interviews she has said about when she first came on. It was Jonathan Frid who told her, she's a witch, right? What did you think of that?
I think Laura Parker. Well, first, I will never speak ill of Laura Parker. I mean, she, I have more than a scholarly interest in her, and I will just leave that there. But I think she does a lot in terms of, this could have easily been a Glenn Close and Fatal Attraction performance. Yeah. What she does is, everything she does is deliberate, and she never feels like generic crazy woman who had a fling with someone and can't get over it. What's also interesting when talking about Laura Parker, have you read the book Angelique's Descent?
No, but I've read Heiress of Collinwood.
Okay, well, Angelique's Descent, towards the end, it's like one of the first tie-in novels that came out. And Parker suggests that um, Andre Dupre, that basically Andre Dupre is Angelique's father, that he had a dalliance with her mother.
Mm.
And it was around the time, I'm not sure if Josette had been born or was, the Countess was, but the implication is that Angelique is not just motivated by, hey, she has feelings for this guy Barnabas, but that, basically she feels entitled. She's like, I got screwed out of an inheritance because my dad decided, because my biological father decided, screw it, I'm just going to have my way with this person.
Yeah.
But I think with her, it's very layered, and I like the fact that it never feels like one dimension. Even when she's casting spells, it's like, and she's like lighting tarot cards on fire. It's, it's funny because I have two friends who perform fire spinning. One uses hand torches and the other like big fans, and it's like, now I know where I get my fascination with women in fire. It's Laura Parker. Not a bad thing. Not a bad thing.
The technique, like her technique isn't the same when she's
Right.
casting spells. I'm with you. Like, because with Barnabas, she uses the doll and the handkerchief. Well, next thing you know, she's using pins. Well, the next time she's lighting tarot card. It's like, holy shit, this woman has range,
Yeah, and it's what Laura Parker brings to the role is intelligence.
Yeah.
I mean, I rewatched the scene where Barnabas shoots her, and first, you're right, he is a bad shot. Okay, it is Dark Shadows canon. Barnabas Collins should not be allowed near guns. But she actually said, and it's a detail that I had forgotten when I replay it in my head. And she says, you didn't do your job well. If you want your beloved Josette so much, you shall have her, but not in the way that you have chosen. And that's deliberate. That's not a, because I always wondered, did she just like curse him and then a vampire bat just happened to come in? So it does have that suggestion that like she isn't thinking like, okay, I'm going to curse this guy, but I'm going to make sure that he's immortal, and he, it's a weird thing to wish on, but it also makes sense. It's like, if I can't have you and you want this person, I'm going to make sure that the two of you have each other in a way that you're not going to like. And we've seen throughout the series, Barnabas does not like being a vampire.
Yep.
So, but I do think knowing that she's a witch, I mean, she does that weird, that cool thing with her eyes, and she has such great blue eyes that you cannot help but look at Laura Parker. You just can't.
I know there's a lot of great performances in 1795. Does she just steal the entire arc, in your opinion?
I think she does, and I would say maybe Trask is a pretty good. The other two I would say would be Trask and Ben Stokes.
Yep.
And Ben Stokes, it's there, David. He's going to knock it out of the park no matter what you do. Like he's just one of those really good character actors that can just, been a bad performance from Thayer David. Mm-hmm. But Trask, I think, is the other. Like he's the first real enemy that the Collins have, because Laura Collins, the Phoenix, it's just something that happened to Roger. He didn't provoke her. It was like, okay, they married, she died, but now she's back to take, she's not really an enemy. She's just kind of a force of nature that just happens to get involved with the Collinses. Mm-hmm. Paul Stoddard isn't really much of an enemy because it's like he's easily defeated. I mean, and he comes back broken later on. But Trask is the first man who's like, you know what? I'm going to get my way. And you see this throughout the Trask lineage, is that it's that I'm going to be pious. And Trask is an interesting contrast to the Collinses, because the Collins, I think their attitude is, hey, this is who I am. You don't like it, tough. Whereas Trask is like, I'm going to be pious and above board and all this other, and mightier than thou. But he's really kind of a hypocrite.
Mm.
There's a delicious justice in him, and Barnabas like basically bricking him in the basement of the old house. You just can't, because he's going around saying witches and blah blah blah. Like first, he's calling Victoria Winters a witch rather than like, despite the fact that there actually is a witch doing evil stuff.
Yeah.
But he's the first person who says, I am going to infiltrate this family, and I am going to actively push my agenda on them and gain from them.
Mm-hmm. He's sort of, in a weird way, I know Jason McGuire is a con man, but in many ways, so is Trask. He's even worse of a con man, because he's using, and you see this in real life where there are con men who use God, who literally use God as a crutch. And he's literally taken the Lord and saying, I speak for not, and there are those who will do this. I speak for God. And it's like, holy shit, dude. Like, can you pull, like, you just want, like, when you hear this dude, you just want to punch him. And I love Jerry Lacey to death. He's great at this. The performance he gives is amazing. I mean, I love this role more so than I love the detective role they were giving him, because this role it's like, holy, I don't picture him as a trench coat wearing detective. And I know people say he looks like Humphrey Bogart, and he even played one of Humphrey's roles, which is cool. But when I hear and see him, I think of the Trasks he played, Reverend Gregory, Lamar Trask. It's just amazing performance he gave.
Yeah, and I think it's the tension between his look, which is more of the Bogart kind of, not the traditionally, and the way he acts all of those parts. Because I think 1897 is where he's maybe a little gentler than before. He's still a con man, but usually that kind of character is played with, you're welcome in God's hands, and we love you. And it's that sense of condescension where you just want to smack the guy in the face because he's talking to you like you're a trained chimp.
Yeah.
But he's like, he's all fire and brimstone, and he's a force of nature. Lamar Trask in 1840 is kind of the same way.
Yeah.
But it's that sense of, it's that he's got the look like, yeah, he looks like a hardcore detective. And I know that, I think they probably cast him as a detective in during the whole Dream Curse Adam, because it's like, okay, we've got this guy, we need to do something with him. Hell, he looks like Bogart, let's make him a detective.
Right. I think they could have, like, I love how they introduce him, like he's investigating, like he's going after the Collins family, which it's like, here's a convenient thorn in the side, and I like that. But I love the Reverend Trask character that he does, and it's amazing. Sarah David, Ben Stokes, you talk, how great is his performance of this character?
Yeah, and the nice thing about Ben Stokes is it's clear that he's loyal, and it's clear that he's set up to be, for lack of a better term, dumber than Barnabas. But there's something about the genuine way in which he and Barnabas interact, that there is a friendship where you can kind of see that contrasted with Angelique and Josette, where there's that kind of superficial friendliness, but that like Angelique's like, are you for real, woman? Seriously? Seriously? Like, where I think with Ben and Barnabas, it's a little bit more, it may not necessarily be equals in terms of status, but they have a mutual regard for each other.
Yeah.
And especially if you're living in the same house where you're dealing with Joshua and Naomi,
Yeah.
you're like, you know, it's like, it's probably like Barnabas needs all the friends he can get, and Ben's probably like, I don't want to deal with that Joshua. He's going to keggers with Ben Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, and I just don't trust the guy.
I like how when Thayer David, Ben Stokes, and Laura Parker Angelique are in the woods. Ben Stokes, I love this line he says about turning Joshua into a jackass. And I'm just like, and even like Laura Parker's Angelique gives us look like Ben, like no, we're not doing that. I'm like, no, I'm with
Well,
Ben.
Joshua's halfway there anyway, so it's
Great,
really a
do it.
waste of magic.
Do it. Just do it, girl. Give Ben, because Ben needs to just hit Joshua one time. for it. But it's a really funny scene. I like it. And I'm with you. Ben is a really great character. I got to give a shout out. Christine Pierce and Cara Tillies from Between the Shadows had brought up in one of their podcasts that they didn't feel, they know Ben had went to prison, but they don't think he actually is a criminal. They think he was wrongfully sent to prison. What are your thoughts?
It would make sense because you don't get the sense of Ben Stokes doesn't seem like the kind of guy who, like, if he's the worst I could see him doing is stealing, but
Right.
like stealing, like, if he had a child who was hungry, stealing a loaf of bread, maybe that. I do think um and I think because of his manner, it may be that there was someone who, um maybe there's someone who said, oh well, he's just weird, put him in jail. um but there is something about the character that doesn't, and I think it's there's no guile in Ben Stokes. He just seems like a very down to earth, maybe slightly reserved individual. But if you're a servant and you're treated like a servant, you're going to be that way.
I think in a small way, he sort of reminds me of the Shadow Agent Cliff Marsland, who was who spent time wrongfully in prison for committing murder. Now, I think that's what Ben goes to prison for, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe he was framed. I mean, that's not hard to do, especially the time he lived in. I'm talking about Ben, not Cliff. Yeah, Cliff too. But Ben could have been framed for murder. It's not hard to do. So I could, I see, I'm with you. I see Christine and Kara's point that he could have been sent to prison wrongfully and perhaps he's not a criminal. It's a hell of a point they made. What did, so Victoria Winters, and we will get to Josette, I promise. Victoria Winters, she goes back in time and we do get her witchcraft trial, and we get some of her in 1795, mainly in jail. But the story itself is more told through the people who lived 1795. What did you think of that?
I think at this point they were trying to figure. I think the production was trying to figure out a way to politely let go of the character,
Right.
because again they're trying to shift it away from Victoria Winters to Barnabas Collins. Um, I know that Alexandra Moltke had always said, "Hey, look, she wanted to play. She didn't want to play the ingenue. She wanted to play a darker character."
Right.
And why they didn't call her in like '70s saying, "Hey, look, we got a script for you. You can be a badass. Just come back." Why they never did. But I think it was their way of kind of, and you can't really give her, like, if you give her a proper death, it's Dark Shadows. There's going to be that, oh, she'll come back as a ghost.
Right.
You can't really like send her off.
Right.
Okay, you can't really kill her, because there's a lot of. So if you kind of put her in jail where she's a witch and you kind of shove her off to the side, and later on they kind of resolve that storyline where she's stuck in the past, you kind of are able to very subtly move the focus away.
Mm.
Um, because then after this arc, Barnabas just after this arc, Barnabas kind of does the because it's weird because like I think before, and I'm not sure where it falls in, but like he's gung ho on Maggie, that falls through. He starts getting gung ho on Victoria for some reason, and then kind of after that, he's kind of like, oh well, whatever, he doesn't seem that obsessed until 1897, but I may be misremembering. But I think they were trying to phase her out, but that was the kindest way that they could do it is, okay, we'll just move her to the side and hope nobody notices. And there are probably fan letters saying what happened to Victoria, and it's like, oh crap, let's figure out a way to get this done. So
I'm going to help you out with the Maggie Victoria thing. When Victoria comes back real quick from 1795, she says to Barnabas about, oh, I knew you weren't dead. I knew you weren't dead. And he's like, oh, like he doesn't say it, but he gives the oh shit look, like, oh no, what did she find out? And Julia's even questioning Barnabas and stuff. And so Barnabas bites Victoria and then takes her, and they're trying to leave town. And well, Jeff Clark, Peter Bradford, whatever you want to call him, steps out onto the highway, and there's an accident, and they end up in the hospital. Prior to that, you're right. When Barnabas first comes out of the coffin in 1960s, he kidnaps Maggie, and holds her for a while, and then she, with the help of his sister Sarah, the ghost at the time, a ghost, Maggie escapes. Now we see Sarah as a little girl in 1795. Victoria, what I love Alexander Moltke. My favorite character is Victoria Winters. And I don't mind that they just sort of use her to get us back to 1795. That's what they really did. They needed a character who, at this time, like I love Barnabas, but from a protagonist standpoint, there's no character more over prior to the 1795 arc than Victoria Winters.
right.
I mean, she's over as a baby face. I'm going to use a wrestling term. But, and so they use her to get us back to 1795. She's always wondered about the past anyway. It all makes sense. Like everything, like you said, nothing felt forced. Well, this doesn't either. And it feels, when she comes back, Barnabas does say to Julia that Phyllis Wick, the biggest difference is Phyllis Wick was taken away the night his coffin was taken away to the mausoleum. Victoria was taken away prior to Barnabas being cursed. Mm-hmm. So there's a big difference between Victoria's journey and Phyllis Wick's journey, which is amazing. What are your thoughts?
I think it's one of the very earliest indications of like what people now call the butterfly effect, where if you change one thing, smaller changes happen. I think the fact that, and I agree with you, I think the reason they use Victoria is you need someone who the audience already identifies with, but you also need someone who can do the, because this is the first time they've done this, you need someone to go, hey, you look like that really nice Joe Haskell guy. Oh no, you're the evil con man Nathan Forbes. Hey, you look like Roger. Oh wait, your name is Joshua. And Naomi, is that your sister? Oh no, that's your wife. Oh look, it's David. No, his name's Daniel. Like you need that, because what will happen in later arcs will be in 1897. It's Barnabas that goes back. Somehow manages to get. I can't remember how he managed to get out of his coffin, but it's that kind of, you have that. Here's the character who's already there in body, and can do the whole kind of, oh, you look like so and so and such and such. It is interesting that the portrait of Josette in the old house does not look like Catherine Lee Scott.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like, and this is just headcanon, that when you go back in time in the Dark Shadows universe, your brain kind of starts putting familiar faces onto family members. So like when Barnabas came out of his coffin, he looks at Roger and thinks, "Oh, that he's probably a jerk like my dad was," and oh, Elizabeth is probably like my mom was, and oh wait, because he fixates on Maggie, but she doesn't look like a portrait. But it's that you know if you and I spent 175 years in a coffin, I think our memories would be a little foggy to say the least.
I'd like to think after 175 years, yeah, my memory's a little. Yeah, I need to kickstart my brain here.
Right.
I'm with you. You would need to remember exactly what everybody looked like. I think that's something too they could fix too, like with now, like if we get a new Dark Shadow series, hopefully, that when we see the portrait, just paint Catherine Lee Scott. Just put Catherine's face, paint her up
Yeah,
because
and the thing is with Catherine Lee Scott, you wouldn't need to do much de-aging.
right,
You wouldn't need to use that.
right. She's so beautiful and lovely. What did you think of her performance as Josette?
I really I loved it because I think this would have been an when I look at acting on Dark Shadows, um, when you consider that most of the scripts were written by white dudes in their 40s, you would expect that a lot of the actor that you get a lot of like really cookie cutter kind of portrayals. So
Mhm.
like and Josette is not just could have easily been the innocent, doe-eyed, wide-eyed um, fiance. And Catherine Lee Scott, it would not surprise. I know that cast got along, but it would not surprise me if like Laura Parker and Catherine Lee Scott were kind of thinking to themselves, "Well, she's doing this really cool thing, so I need to go one better." And
Right.
especially when you get to Widow's Hill
Yep.
and that particular and the vision she has,
Mhm.
it's never, it never feels like none of the actors ever feel like they're phoning it in.
Right.
And I know that was, again, it could have easily been, yeah, we could be on General Hospital and I could be a doctor talking about weird medical stuff and yeah, I could do a paycheck, but hey, I'm in 18th century garb. I'm facing off against a vampire. I'm going to live it up.
Yeah. I'm our buddy Patrick McRae puts in his book about where Josette's at Jeremiah's grave,
Hmm.
and it's beautiful because he's right. It's when Barnabas is looking at, he looks away because he realizes, hey, he doesn't deserve to look at her, and I'm with him on that. It's Catherine Lee Scott's portrayal as Josette. It literally, when we first, for those who don't know, Josette's ghost comes out of the portrait. She's the first ghost that comes out. Now, I'll get into the other ghost that Victoria sees here in a second, but she's the ghost you see come out of Josette's portrait as Josette. But I always think of Catherine Lee Scott when I think of that woman coming down off the steps. I think of Josette's portrait when I see Catherine Lee Scott as Josette by Jeremiah's grave
Hmm.
because it's that memorable. Something I want to ask you: when Victoria is standing in the drawing room, this is way back in the beginning, and for those who don't know, no, Bill Malloy wasn't dead at this point in time. When she sees this figure standing, who do you think she saw?
I think she probably just was like, oh, it's a ghost of a woman. I'm
Yeah,
not sure because Victoria Winters was probably like, the, uh, you know, she never understood anything. So I don't think she should have had I think she would have just said, okay, it's a ghost of a woman. I don't know who this is. I'm not sure I want to know.
right. Because I think there's a moment of terror too for her. I mean, she's all alone, in that house too, and I, I could sort of see what you're saying. Like, do I really want to know if this is a ghost or not? No, 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 too much because she's already sort of halfway blaming herself for David too, because Liz is blaming her for David, and I could see that. So I wanted to ask you that one. So back to 1795, Victoria is going to get found guilty. But before that, what did you think of Joel Carruthers as Nathan Forbes?
I think he has a. You can tell he's having like fun playing this kind of roguish character,
Yeah,
especially since Joe Haskell was so, he's basically too good to be true. I mean, he's a good guy,
yeah,
but like, you could see where he's kind of he's not camping it up. He's just kind of making he's really savoring. I mean, there are notes where it comes off as a little false, but I think because he's playing a con man, it's supposed to.
yeah.
Um,
I think he plays a really interesting heel here
mhm.
because, and this is what I find really not strange about his performance, but when it happens, and I'm remembering Angelique's curse. She she's cursing Barnabas not just for Josette, but for anybody Barnabas loves or cares about, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so Naomi dies, Sarah dies, Joshua can't stake him, right? And remember, Joshua actually shoots Barnabas with a pistol, but it's not loaded with silver down in the basement of the old house.
Right.
The next time, when it's loaded with silver, he can't pull the trigger. So the curse sort of does affect Joshua. When I went back, I noticed this. Nathan doesn't really turn heel until after Barnabas is cursed. Do you think there's something to that or no?
Hmm. Yeah, I never thought about that. Because I couldn't see why Nathan uh would necessarily be perceptive to that, or if the curse would be perceptive to that.
Right.
I might think that maybe given that situation that Nathan is seeing all this stuff going on in the Collins household, and it's like, hey, if I'm going to marry this Millicent, I got to do it now. You know
Right.
what I mean? It's like because there's no one in the Collins family that can tell Millicent, you know what? Don't trust that Nathan guy. He's a little shady.
Right. I do think no matter what, he's playing one hell of a heel. I'm with you. He's having a lot of fun. And it was actually nice to get to see Joel Carruthers play something else, because you're
Mhm.
right. Up until this time, we had known him as Lovable Joe, but now he's this con man heel, Lieutenant Nathan Forbes, and it's like, man, dude, you a jerk. And I love him for it. It's a hell of a performance he gives. I love how he's outside the courthouse. Oh, I hope they find her guilty, not guilty. And it's like, dude, really, really? Now you're pulling back? No. What did you think of Victoria Winter's trial?
Whew. Um, I think that it was kind of you know, I, obviously I thought it was okay. I mean, it was, I don't know how prevalent witchcraft trials were in the late 1790s, but yeah, it kind of seemed like very perfunctory, like, okay, yeah, she's a witch, let's just move her through it. And I think the other kind of maybe the third secret weapon is introducing Roger Davis as Peter Bradford because it's a as Patrick says in his book. And by the way, for those watching, Dark Shadows Daybook, Patrick McRae, go buy it.
Yep, absolutely
Um, that
recommended.
yeah, it's a different. He's younger. There's a different kind of energy to him, and I think that kind of helps lift it a little more because it adds this layer of it now becomes more than just all these older people dealing with stuff. It gives a little bit. He kind of raises the game a little bit. So I think that injects a lot more. It's it feels like the drama is notched up a bit during the trial when he's involved.
Yeah. I really do think Roger Davis. He, I'm with you. He adds that element, and he's the perfect counterpart for Trask. He really is. I know he's not Superman, but it feels like, hey, I stand for truth, justice, and the American way. Now, he doesn't say those words, but his body language and his actions give off those words in many ways.
Yeah, and again, he's playing. You would think that someone who is that inherently noble would be kind of, like Barnabas, like Fred plays noble well,
Right.
very regal, very distinguished. Um, Davis is playing it with a little bit more urgency. Like it's not just, hey, I believe in this. It's like he will cut a dude if it means doing the right thing. You know what I mean?
Yep. He'll if he has to fight somebody to the death to to prove her innocence, he'd do it, and you love him for it, and it's really cool to see that. What did you think of Abigail Collins and Sarah Collins?
Um, Abigail, I thought was kind of like more of a um, not a useless character, but just kind of like someone who was there. But I
Right.
think with Sarah, I think we needed. I think Sarah served a couple of purposes because leading into this, she was kind of like the good ghost, the one trying to save Barnabas. And I think it's probably maybe one of the few real if if Ben Stokes is the healthiest friendship that Barnabas has, Sarah's like the healthiest family relationship.
Yeah.
It is clear that there's affection and love, and um, it and I think when Sarah dies, it really is gutting because it's like it's not just that the curse has been fulfilled, but it's like, you know, it's like it's one thing to lose your fiance
Right.
or to lose your mom,
Right.
but to lose your sis. I mean, to lose a family member, I've just learned it's tough. But losing a younger sibling, and I'm not sure how old Barnabas is supposed to be in this timeline, but let's assume he's like 30 or 40 because it was not uncommon for men to marry slightly older and have younger wives. But
Right.
if there's like a 20, 38, that's gutting.
Yeah.
Especially since she didn't die of like disease, she died because of something because of his actions, even though it was a roundabout series of actions.
I think her death is because we see her, we get introduced to her as a ghost, like you said. We really do, and so she dies, and we keep hearing her say as a ghost, "I got sick," and when you go back and you watch her die, it may if you did not hate Angelique yet, this just finishes the job. It really does. Her death puts if there were any doubt of the cake, this is the icing. Her death is literally like so gut punching. It's like son of a bitch. Like
And it's not even the fact that she died at Angelique's hand. Angelique was torturing her with the doll.
yep,
That makes it much worse.
yep,
That it's um because it wasn't just okay, Angelique did something and she got sick and died. The
right,
fact that she knew what Barnabas wanted and used it against him.
yep,
She took advantage of okay, the fact that she said, okay, well, I'm going to have Josette fall in love with the person closest to to your surrogate brother, for lack of a
right,
better term. The
right,
fact that she's tried to blackmail Ben, like she kind of sort of redeems herself in future arcs, but here she's evil, but there's a three-dimensionality to her evil. She's not just cackling. She's not just cackling because or upset because Barnabas did her wrong. She's
yep,
doing it because it's like, there's a methodicism to it. There's a, a near sadism to it. That's how badly she's hurting, you know? That's how much she is angry. And it's not excusing it. It's just, it's if I, it's one of the things to kind of go a little bit on a sidetrack with neurochemistry. When you're infatuated with someone, your brain generates um, dopamine, uh, a lot of dopamine, which is like it's basically your brain. Your brain makes synthetic cocaine because that's what cocaine receptor. So you feel good, but your serotonin drops, so you get depressed because hey, I like this person, can't have it. Then you've got a mixture of cortisol and adrenaline. So you get stressed up and you've got to do something, and you end up in this vicious cycle of, um, wanting but not having. And at this point, Angeline is so steeped in that cycle. It's like it's not enough to just kind of, you know, in a different setting, she'd probably just stalk Barnabas, just follow him around, do whatever. Here she's like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get you back, even though realistically, I should just accept that, yeah, you and I had a thing. It's over. You've moved on. Um, you hit it and you quit it. I get that.
Right.
And it's kind of hard, but it shows how um, it's not just about, and we don't know if like, I'm not sure from the dialogue, it's implied that like Barnabas made her any promises, like, because they end up getting married during this arc. But I don't think there's ever been that like, I'm not sure if there's ever the implication that Barnabas made false promises that he knew he wouldn't keep, because that would add another layer to why she's so sadistic.
I think when she's choking him with the doll, he says, "Oh, if you help me, I'll do whatever you ask." But really, that's like, I, I do think that Barnabas and Angelique's relationship is a hell of a thing, and I'm with you. Would I have left Martinique and Angelique? No, no, I would have stayed. I'm staying. But she, the curse itself is just pure. It's everything, and Sarah's death is just. I'm with you. It's gut punching and heartbreaking. But two, Naomi's death too. Like the poison. I mean, when Nathan tells Naomi that Barnabas is in the tower, or about the Collinsport Strangler too, it's like, and she drinks the poison. It's like, oh no. What did you think of that?
Ooh, it's just, again, it's heartbreaking because it's so unnecessary. You know what I mean?
Right.
It is. You kind of go, um, because at that point things have just declined at such a point where it would have been, if the show had been going on a downward spiral, in terms of ratings,
Right.
that might have been a natural kind of like, okay, we'll just kill everyone off except for Barnabas will be in the coffin, and then we'll just come back, do a few week wrap up, and move on. But that's the thing about 1795. It's the first storyline that suggests the Collins family. The Collins family is a character. You see it through the the different types within the family, but it really shows that this family is cursed. This isn't just, it's like it's the difference between the Addams family and the Munsters. With the Addams family, you get the sense that there's an Addams history. The Munsters, it's just, okay, it's the Universal monsters. Let's just, put people in makeup, make goofy jokes, and move on. I think this is where you really see the tragedy of the Collins family.
Yeah.
Um, and thinking in terms of the overall kind of, all the episodes, the events of the 1690s, this is where they start to come to fruit. This is like the first real. Um, Judah Zachary was not fooling. You know what I mean? This is
Yeah.
proof Judah Zachary. You do not mess with Judah Zachary.
Yeah. Is he is he the biggest and most evil villain in Dark Shadows history, you think?
I would say yes, because when you look at it, Angelique and Nicholas Blair are really just servants of Diabolos.
Right.
One of the devil's middlemen. Um, Trask is a more localized threat.
Right.
Other than the Collins, there's really no. Um, Patofi, I would say, is a good second place villain.
Right.
Because he actually, in many ways, he won because he took over Quentin. The Leviathans were defeated because Jeb Hawks decided, well, he decided he never grew up. He still was a kid saying, why do we have to listen to the book? Why do we have to do this? I want what I want. I'm trying to think of other. I think that Judah Zachary is bigger not just because the thing is, he not only got his revenge, we've seen that revenge play out. It's like if you were to put the episodes in date order, where you started with 1795 with the episodes that take place in the 1690s, then 1795, then 1840, 1897, and the 60s, you would see that, okay, here's the prequel, here's the set, 1690 is the setup, and here's how it all plays out.
Yeah.
And that's why I think Judah Zachary is the ultimate big bad, because everyone else is kind of either too small or too local. Maybe, and I'm sure that, someone's probably written fan fiction about a big throwdown between Patofi and Judah Zachary, because I could see Patofi saying, you know what, I can take this guy. I am better than this guy. He'd lose, but I'd love to see that fight.
I'm with you. Zachary, me and Patrick did a 1995 video, and I said the 1995 art, it feels like it's being written and directed by George A. Romero. It's that terrifying. When you see Collinwood destroyed, I mean, it's in ruins. No one else did that but Judah Zachary. And we've never seen Professor Stokes sort of brought to his knees. We see that in 95. Quentin is driven mad. Carolyn is killed. David is dead. It's, like I said, it feels like a damn George A. Romero movie. And it's so terrifying. It's like, oh my God. And then when you go back to 1970 and you watch it all unfold, it still makes that terrifying. I'm with you. Judah Zachary is the baddest of the bad. They should just take the song "Bad to the Bone" and give it to Judah Zachary, because that's what
it's. The 1995 arc, and kind of when they go back to 1970 to fix it, that's Judah Zachary's endgame.
Yep.
And that's probably one where, it's parallel time. They're trying to think, okay, what the heck do we do to top that? Because the ratings are going down. Let's just do 2 weeks of Collinwood is just messed up. It's gone. And that way, because when you give, in any kind of writing, when you give your protagonist a huge challenge or a huge defeat, that gives them the ability to bounce back. With this arc, it was basically, how do we find the vampire? What's going on? So that's why this launched. Then with 1897, it's, you've got these two ghosts that are, wreaking havoc on Collinwood. So we got to go back and fix that. Parallel time is, okay, I need to get a cure for my vampirism, so I'm going to go into this parallel world, or presumably I'm going to find the I Ching or magic doors or do what I can to get back to my original body. The 1995 arc is, okay, stuff got real.
Yep.
It's not just an inconvenience. People are mad. Stokes is on his knees. Carolyn's nuts. Quentin is just not even Quentin is like actually shell shocked. We need to fix this, or else this is going to happen. And it's, it's not even the idea of. There's an episode of Doctor Who called Pyramids of Mars where they go back to the 1910s. Sarah, the companion, says, well, we know 1980 exists. Why don't we just stay here? Why don't we just leave? And the doctor takes her to that 1980, and it's a wasteland. He says, I've just shown you what could happen. And he doesn't even say that. Sarah says, yeah, we got to stop this now. 1995 is the there wasn't even that. I don't know if the writers had that kind of like nuance in their writing, but they're like, okay, if we set ourselves a future, we got to figure out a way out of it. So, yeah, 1995 is like it's like the writers kind of said, okay, this is our last challenge. Can we write our way out of this situation? And it's like, yes, they could, but the ratings were still going down. So it's not and that's the nice thing about the Dark Shadows is even though they may not have always been done easy, you always get the sense that the writers were like, okay, what the heck can we do? What can we do further? How can we move? Excuse me. How can we move this further? And it was never like, okay, well, let's throw another vampire in and do that. It always seems like it's, and even for daytime television, it's like, can we do this and how far can we go? Versus, yeah, let's just kind of coast a while.
I don't think the writers ever phoned it in. And I think really if you want proof of that, look at 1995. I did a poll on Twitter. What's your favorite timeline? Now, on Twitter, the person who creates the poll isn't allowed to vote. But if I could have voted, I would have voted for 1995 because as I was watching Dark Shadows in syndication, I'm thinking, there's nothing they can do to surprise me. And guess what, folks? I was wrong. And I'm glad I was wrong because that moment is like, holy shit. And it doesn't just leave your jaw on put your jaw on the floor. It leaves it there. And it's so well done. It's well written. It's well performed by every actor involved. It's beautiful, but chaotic.
Right. And I mean, when you look at how the past, when they go to the past, 1795 feels like it's about, in terms of the fiction, not in terms of the production, it feels like it's just about to fall apart. The Collins family is just teetering. In 1897, it actually happens and you feel there's a lot more of a threat there. The 1995 and the 1840 arc basically say, it's like, yeah, we're going there and we got to stop it from going there. And that's why I think it's so effective because it's not, it isn't, we got to stop this from happening. It's like, oh crap, it's happened. How do we fix it?
What's your favorite moment from 1795?
I would have to say Angelique's curse because it's a excellent piece of writing. Angelique is Laura Parker is so on point. She never oversells it, even though she was shot by Barnabas.
Yeah.
There will never be a Barnabas Collins NYPD television show. Like, no, the vampire that couldn't shoot straight. But where she says you can't, you're gonna get Josette, but not in the way you have her. You shall never rest, and you shall never love, for whoever loves you will die. That is my curse upon you, Barnabas Collins, and you will have to deal with it for all eternity. I mean, it's just everything right there. And it basically is like, bam, that's where Dark Shadows begins.
Yeah. I think my favorite moment is when Angelique realizes the curse is going to come back on her too. It's such a good. It's one of those moments like realization has set in, but even though Barnabas chokes her, you sort of get the sense that Angelique's not gone. She's coming back. This one you have not heard the last of this woman,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a really cool moment, and I love it. 1795 is a lot of fun, and
Mm-hmm.
it's for those who have not watched this arc, go watch it. It's amazing.
Yeah, I would say this is
Yep,
a must watch arc.
absolutely.
It's um, simply because it lays so much of the foundation of why Dark Shadows continued.
Yeah.
And, the time travel could have been a gimmick, but it gives us lore, it gives us really well examined character studies. It kind of really cements the Collins family as a character in the show. That it's not just that show about the vampire, it's about a family, and one of them happens to be a vampire. And later, one of them happens to be a recovering werewolf with a magic picture that keeps him young.
It- you know, if Solomon Kane was holding that flintlock pistol, we wouldn't be having this discussion, Gordon.
There are times where I wish that maybe one or two of the writers would have read some Robert E. Howard, especially the Solomon Kane stories, because that would have been. I mean, imagine instead of Trask being the fire and brimstone 1795, he's got a sword and a flintlock, and he's like, you know, Simon Trask, vampire hunter. There you go. Fanfic fanfic writers, break out your pencils. Let's see that online.
Absolutely. Gordon, is there anything you want to add before we go, man?
Now, I just want to say thank you for the moment of silence very early on, and thank you for having me again.
Absolutely, no problem, man. I enjoy having fans on, and this has been a lot of fun for me. Link to Gordon's Amazon page is going to be in the description box. Go follow him on Twitter. It's
Yeah, I'm much funnier on Twitter than I am in person. So
You've been really a great guest here tonight, man. It was a pleasure having you on, speaking
thank
as
you.
the
Glad
host,
to be here.
and I had a lot of fun. So go follow. Link to Gordon's Amazon page will be in the description box, and yes, link to the Dark Shadows Daybook will be in the description box. Shout out to
Yeah,
our friend.
buy that book because
Buy that
Patrick
book.
will never let me live it down.
Buy that book, or else, or Angelique's coming for your soul.
Yeah, and if for those watching, in the comments, leave if you want me if you want me and Patrick to have like a Dark Shadows throwdown with our host like moderating. That would do that night right now, because think of it as like I'm Angelique and he's Josette. Think of it that way. Go do it. Let's have fun.
That's right. Shout out to our buddy Patrick McRae. Those links will be in the description box. Thank you so much, Gordon.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.